On this episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored, I am so excited. I have three amazing guests. We're going to be talking about making ends meet financially. This is episode 4 of a 4-part series on diastasis. You absolutely have to tune in because you don't want to miss any of this crucial information. All right, welcome back to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm your host, Dr. Roddy Raban. I am joined with three beautiful, fantastic women from around the country. Our topic today is we're going to be doing episode 4 of a 4-part series. The goal was in this 4-part series is to educate a woman from A to Z as it applies to diastasis recti, separation of abdominal muscles. And we've had some amazing guests, and this segment is going to be no different. So after everyone has decided that they realize what's going on with their bodies and what they need to do, the truth of the matter is that everything in the world costs money. And when it comes to finances, it's really a challenge. So unless you're lucky and you're a billionaire, which none of us are, none of us at least on this particular conversation, you need to sort out finances. And our guests are people who did it. They manage, they have kids, they have husbands, they have responsibilities, mortgage, and we figure it out. And we're going to go through that. We're also going to talk about this whole concept of insurance. I think it's super important to have the dialogue because as we all know in life, nothing changes unless we start to talk about it. I do think and hope that eventually this will be something that eventually will be covered because there's no question that it should be, and it won't be unless we make enough of a stink about it. And we're going to start the stink process today. So thank you for all tuning in. Where do we have? Let's introduce everybody. We have Lisa. Where are you at, Lisa?
I'm in Northern California, actually.
Northern California. Beautiful Northern California. We have Stephanie. Where are you?
Hi, just outside of Seattle.
Seattle. And we have Rihanna. Where are you?
I'm in Winnipeg, Canada.
Okay, is Winnipeg east?
It's directly above North Dakota. So right in the
Okay, well, I was going to say we were doing a really nice job of just going straight up from Los Angeles to Northern Cal and then you just screwed it up and we went to have to go off. Okay. All right. So all three women here today have had diastasis repaired. In our other episodes, we talked about all the crucial elements, like how do I know I have it? Once I know I have it, how do I avoid wasting time and money doing things that aren't going to fix it? We talked about the symptoms that patients suffer both physically and emotionally. We talked about how to find the right surgeon so you don't end up having a bad outcome and rather become empowered as a result of the surgery decision you made rather than become regretful. We've done all those things, and so people will be able to tune in. Today, we're going to focus on how to pay for it. So the first thing we want to talk about is why the hell is this not covered? So your husbands, and I like to make this sexist because I think it's important, your husbands may have a pinhole groin hernia, this big. And as a result of that pinhole groin hernia, they may have symptoms. What are those symptoms? Pain. Pain when? When they're active. May have some dysfunction. It may affect their ability to urinate. It may affect their intimacy and sexuality. All that sounds familiar, guys? And they're able to go to their doctor and say, hey, listen, I'm having these symptoms, and they'll diagnose them with a groin hernia. And depending on their insurance and their insurance coverage, they may or may not be able to have that procedure, which is what? Correction of that groin hernia, covered totally or partially if they so choose, right? Because it is medically necessary, much like a gallstone, much like fibroids, much like other medical necessary things. Okay, we're all on board. So a woman with severe diastasis, and I'm not talking about some minor little bulge. I'm talking about somebody whose abdomen is unrecognizable and who has all these functional issues, as we've discussed on so many occasions. Severe back pain requiring girdles and epidurals, digestive issues, incontinence, constipation, all these things, goes to her doctor, much like her husband did, finds out that she has severe DR, and then goes to seek some surgical correction, only to find out that there is no coverage for this particular entity. Why is that? Because at this current time, it is considered not medically necessary. It's a cosmetic repair. Don't you guys know that? Don't you know that all of the things you're experiencing are in your head? And this is just for vanity's sake that you guys came and went and had surgery, right? You guys wanted to look better because whatever reasons, you didn't do enough exercise, or I don't know, you ate too much, or whatever the hell it was. And you know what? You guys need to just suck it up. Doesn't that infuriate you and anger you and make you want to just reach through this thing and kill me, even though I'm just devil's advocate? And so as a result, it is really an unfair scenario. And it is clear as day that this needs to be fixed. And why isn't it fixed? Because it involves money. And the reality is that insurance companies do not and will not pay for anything unless they are forced to do so. They do not want to pay for breast reconstruction after mastectomy. They will have to be forced to pay for it. So on and so forth. So for the time being, and I don't know Canada, but I suspect that Canada is similar to America. For the time being, there is no billable code for repair of diastasis. No, doesn't matter how severe it is. It falls under a tummy tuck code, which is considered cosmetic. So we can talk about this advocacy, and I think that having this podcast is helpful. I know that Rihanna has a forum from which she communicates to other DR moms. I know, Stephanie, you've been actively involved. I'm sure, Lisa, you've been talking to friends, and we're spreading the word. But in the meantime, right now, anyone listening to this who wants to fix their severe DR, they're going to have to pay out of pocket. Just the truth, right? How's that possible? I mean, I have 3 kids. I have a mortgage. My husband this, my husband that. So all of you were able to figure out how to make this happen. And number one thing is I hear over and over again by women, and I'm going to want to each of you to discuss this, was the idea of feeling guilty about spending that substantial amount of money, because the assumption has to be made that you're seeking the best. Let's just start out with that. You're going to fix your DR. You're not going to go to the guy down the street because, it's just, I don't know, I'm just going to fix it. We had a segment before this, episode 3, was making sure that if you're going to fix severe DR, you don't just go to some garden variety routine plastic/cosmetic surgeon because you're going to get a shitty result. And not only will you not look good, your functionality will not be good. So let's just assume for the time being that you seek out the best, which is you deserve. You're going to spend a lot of money. I've had many women say, I've delayed this process because I felt guilty. I just had given birth. I have 3 kids. They need to go to college. We talk about money every month. How can I bring myself to spend this kind of money on myself?
Right.
So did you feel that way, Stephanie?
I actually didn't.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel guilty. I'm a massage therapist, and I was literally wasn't able to work. So I wasn't able to participate in family function, like all the other things that we'd mentioned. And my husband was super supportive. So I fortunately was not dealing with the guilt side of things. However, I know that a lot of women do. I maybe felt, maybe a smidge guilty about when I was seeking out the best surgeon, seeing like how much we were, going to be spending, but it's just, I don't know. I'm sold being on the other side that this was, what I needed. So
okay, so that's great. So that says a lot. So what does that say? 1 says that you automatically internally knew that you wanted it and deserved it. 2 is you wanted the best, so you were okay with that.
Yeah.
And 3, and I think this is a really key component, is that you had a beautiful support of your husband. For many women who are listening, they may not have that. Your husbands tell them they look beautiful. There's nothing wrong with you. We have amazing children. Why do you want to do this? With so many other things, we need to remodel the patio, right? And so you had a husband that was like, go for it, honey. Go ahead and spend deep amount of money.
Right.
But I see Lisa shaking her head. Not that her husband wasn't supportive, because I know he was, because he's an amazing guy. But you tell me about your emotional feeling about spending that money on yourself.
Right. So for me, I think in a lot of couples, there's always someone who tends to be more of the saver and one that tends to be more of a spender. So I'm a financial coach by profession. So I see this, and it's not necessarily along gender lines. A lot of it's just personality, and we tend to balance each other out. So in my case, I'm the saver. I was the one who was having a hard time wrapping my mind around the dollar amount. Because regardless of whether you can get insurance to pay a portion or whatever, there's always going to be some amount that you're paying for, whether it's for childcare or whatever other needs that you're going to need during the recovery time. It's going to be a big number. And I just balked at it. And it's the most ridiculous thing that got me to realize that it did matter when I started comparing the cost of the surgery to the cost of a car. And the fact that I wouldn't blink twice to buy a car that our family really needed, but I wasn't willing to spend that on my one and only body that was not functional. And it's so ridiculous. But I mean, for someone who's having their hard time wrapping their mind around a big number on something that feels, I don't know, sometimes we tend to feel like if we're doing something for ourselves, then that is by definition selfish, when obviously we know that's absolutely not true. We'd be willing to spend a small amount of money, sure, but when you get to the big numbers, it blows your mind. So it really took looking at, I mean, how long do we expect this to last? This is our body. This will affect the way we live for the rest of our lives. We're willing to drop $40,000 on a new minivan, and I'm not willing to spend, less than half of that for the body that I'm going to be taking with me through the rest of the life. So when I took a step back and realized, okay, like how much am I worth? Certainly more than a car. So for me, that was the sacrifice we made. I drive an old car because this was a much bigger priority, being able to show up for my family. But it does take sacrifice. I think like the one thing I've learned about money is it's not really about money. We spend tens of thousands of dollars every year. It's about priorities. And for a lot of people, they may not be able to save up for this in a year, but that doesn't preclude them from being able to save up for it over time. It may take longer. For me, this is something that I knew I would need it for almost a decade after I had my first son. And then I had two more. So you may not have that much time, but as soon as you start to realize this may be something for me, I would recommend opening a separate bank account and just starting to make regular, affordable payments towards that. And then I think if in some cases it is the spouse that's not on board, your partner doesn't maybe see the financial priority of this, if they see you start to make those sacrifices, the things that you're willing to put aside. I mean, clothes is the most obvious example. I'm sure everyone here understands you were not buying yourself clothes during this time because it was such a depressing enterprise. When you start putting that money aside, they will start to see this is something meaningful for you. For me, it was the opposite. My husband had to show what sacrifices he was willing to make for me. So whoever it is, whoever's holding up, I think it's important to go through that exercise to realize that you are worth it.
I mean, I think you hit on so many points that I want to highlight before we move to Rihanna and her experience is the following. Number one, it's all about perspective. So when you're in a tunnel vision and you're in a hole and you're looking down this financial overwhelming umbrella, I think when you take a step back and you put things into perspective, if you were to spend thousands of dollars on coloring your hair, you would realize that would be a bad choice of using money. But if you are going to now invest thousands of dollars in your child's education, you realize that's a great source of money. So you have to realize what it is that you're doing and the impact and the longevity of it. And the fact that whatever you're doing is something that you hopefully have done correctly. And we'll get into why you should spend, not more is better, but less is worse. So remember, more is not better, but less is certainly worse. But you want to spend enough that you think I went to the right guy. That ripple effect is monumental in terms of how it affects. So first is perspective of what that money is. It isn't $10. Oh my God, it's $10 for a lifetime, which you can always prorate and realize what you spent basically we spent $1,000 on myself. Second thing is you need to, if you want to be, I love that you're a financial advisor because I'm a financial advisor in my family and I like to put things into, okay, well, we spent 10 here. Well, this is where we're getting it from, right? 10 didn't come from thin air. 10 is, okay, well, this is what it costs. It's $10. So I'm going to take $3 from here and $2 from here. And when we want to spend $5 here, we'll only spend $1 and bam, there's the $10, right? So if you are limited in your funds, one way is to realize what you're going to give to get. And lastly is what you said, it just doesn't happen overnight. You don't just go to sleep and wake up. You're like, oh my God, what's going on with my belly?
Right.
Holy shit. No, this is a gradual process, and almost invariably, it never occurs with the first pregnancy. I've seen thousands of women. It's the second that starts to cause you down that road, and it's almost always the third that is the sucker punch. So if you're a super fit person, the second will be enough for you to be like, uh-oh. And I'm not saying that this is a rule of thumb. There are women who have one child and their belly is wrecked, and there's women who have 5 and look like a surfboard. I'm just saying in general. So the point being is, as you start to notice this and you've been educating yourself, exactly the case. Set aside a set amount of money every month and don't look at it ever again, and know that when the time comes and you're like, I'm ready, I have X amount of money saved. So you're not hit over the head with a sudden amount of money. So those are all such wonderful things. So Rihanna, why don't you tell me your experience when it came to realizing, wow, I got to spend this money on myself because their insurance isn't going to pay for it.
So I'm one of the very few people that actually had the surgery covered by insurance.
Ah, Canada. Everyone moved to Canada. Everybody.
But it is not common. Like the only reason I believe it was covered is because I didn't need skin removal or anything else. It was just strictly a muscle repair. So I have no clue how it was built. I know in the past, severe cases were covered where I live, but like any business, they're cutting back. So unfortunately now there was a few provinces that would cover the surgery and then they don't anymore. So, but
okay. We have 3 perspectives, which is great. I will tell you, because you guys each have what's called N of 1, means you have one experience of one, which is your own experience. I have the experience of, I would say, thousands. Majority of the women I meet fall into Lisa's category. It is seldom that the woman's husband is like high-fiving her and she and her are like, we're going to do this, honey. I can't wait to go to Victoria's Secret. I'm going to buy those sexy underwear. That just doesn't happen. I mean, it does, but it's not often. And I guarantee if you live in America, there is no way on earth you're going to get the insurance to pay for this. I mean, good luck, but you're going to spend thousands of man hours only to find out that when and if they pay, which I've yet to see, it's like they pay $4 and the thing is like $4,000. I mean, it's just nothing. So the way to go about it is something, I think, in my opinion, is to just be methodical about it. Then the next question is, okay, so I've decided I'm going to pay for this. Like, what's the right amount? Like, I've seen somebody, it's like $10, and then I went and saw this other guy, and it was like $20. What the hell? You know that a Coach bag is $300 and a Birkin is 10 grand. Somehow we've established that value, right? If you tell a woman, I'm going to buy a Birkin, their eyes light up. Everyone knows what the value is. Is the leather, is the construct, is how its carrying capacity that much better than the Coach bag? No, but it's a Birkin. So we have established value. It's established in our society. But when you want to get surgery, it's very hard to figure out what is worth what and what am I actually paying for? Am I paying for the actual stitches? Am I paying? So each of you had to make a decision, and most likely each of you went to maybe a few surgeons, and each of them gave you a quote. So how do you decide what it's worth? Why not just pay the least? It's like, I went to 3 guys. One was 5, one was 7, one was 10. This shit's expensive. I'm just going to pay 5. So we'll start with you, Steph.
How did I decide to?
Yeah. How did you decide what it's worth? Did you see a few people?
So I had 4 consults, I think, before you, and, varying degrees of what everyone was asking to be compensated. And they were all close, right? So I was like, okay, I'll just go close. And like, these are the top rated surgeons in my area. Close, but every time
close locally, not close in price. Yeah. Okay, sure. Which makes sense, right? Initially, it's natural for most people, it's surgery to look in their local area because it's convenient and there's recovery and it's less expensive and there's no hotel. If you're lucky, and you identify someone that you're like, wow, this person's really good, high five. But for many, that is not the case. So they were close to you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. They were close to me. And as I started doing more research, getting involved in the DR group on Facebook, and just finding out that there's just so many different methods to do this. And number one, I think, probably I'm not alone in this, is that I really wanted return functionality. And I didn't want to look, like exchanging one alien for another. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want this crazy belly button or this crazy scar. But number one, I did want established functionality. And basically, as I was going to these different surgeons, they're like, well, we can take some extra skin, but I can't guarantee that there's going to be functionality. Or we do the running stitch, or like going into some of the specifics of the methodology. It felt like when we were talking about DR, it was like either like deer in the headlights, like, oh, well, maybe I'm not the one for you, or like, oh, you just need to lose weight, or like all of the things that we hear along the journey. So ultimately I chose a surgeon that, was versed in DR, right? And it was worth for me to go to travel to, but that's why I chose you. And that's how I found value, like 100% in that. This is what I needed for my family and my life and my body to get back. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. So what basically happened is that you looked at the different surgeons, and how you decided what the value was in your instance was you didn't look at the value in its absolute sense. This is 10, this is 20. You looked at the value in what it is that you would be getting and what it is that you wanted. There is no question that severe DR patients should demand equal cosmetic outcome as regular mild DR cases. What does that mean? When patients get on the severe end of things, they start to get lesser and lesser return on the cosmetic side in exchange for the functionality. Large breast reduction. It's okay that it's ugly because now your back doesn't hurt, right?
Right.
No, it's not right. I'm 18. I'm 24. I want to look good. So what happens is sometimes patients are such in despair that they just assume, I won't care. Anything is better than this. You get your DR fixed. Let's just give you the benefit of the doubt that the functionality is fantastic and returns, and you look terrible, which usually is seldom that if you do a shitty job on one, you would do a great job on the other, but nonetheless. And then your DR is done and you're like, yes, I can get on, I can work out. And then every time you get in the locker room and take your clothes off and you look at that ugly abdomen, the Willy Wonka belly button, the high riding scar, the thickened scar, the dog ears, there's 50 things that makes an abdomen look done and weird and bizarre. You're saddened. You're disappointed. You didn't get what you went to go get. And so as a result, you should always demand, I want to be functional and I want to look great. And the truth of the matter is that there are enough amazing surgeons, there are not thousands of them, but there are sufficient number of them through this country and in perhaps Canada, that you can identify that surgeon. You may have to leave. And so you do. And yes, there is a financial ramification. So I'll segue into Lisa. How did you decide how much money you want to spend, you financial advisor? And then how did you decide, well, shit, I got to travel to LA and this guy's asking me to stay there for 2 weeks. And do I need an Airbnb? And God, my kids are going to come. I'm like, this is like adding up like crazy. Screw it. I'm staying local.
Right. Yes.
Did you decide?
Yes. I was really, really hoping that I would not like you and that I would make the decision easy to go with someone local. But I also wasn't happy with that decision because I interviewed 3 people locally. And in all of the cases, I had a serious concern with that surgeon, that I knew that I would be sacrificing something that I was increasing the risk.
What were those things? Because people need to know, like you were able to get through the process without you were unscathed, right? Some people get stuck in the bear trap. So why don't you tell me 3 people you went to? What were the items that you're like, because I was speaking to Renee earlier, and so she was told, listen, I can fix this, but you're going to have no belly button.
Right.
What?
Right. Yeah.
Like you're going to have no belly button. I'm just sorry that, well, that's obviously a red flag.
Right.
Or I can flatten you, but you'll never really be flat. That's a red flag. Or, so what were the 3 things what were the things that were like, eh?
Right. So, I mean, I think basically there are two very terrible outcomes that can come from this surgery, because this is a major surgery. This is not, it's a long operation. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And from the DR group, and also from people that I know personally, because my sister's a twin mom, and so she knows a lot of people in that world who've needed this surgery.
And you had twins, yes?
I did not have twins.
Oh, your sister.
I just had 3 giant babies separately. But there's 2 terrible outcomes. One that I feel like is terrible. I think our greatest resource is time. One is that they have to have the surgery done again after not only the 6-week recovery, but usually because it failed, it's a 6 months of, quite frankly, hell, of just terrible, worse than before, serious issues. And then they have to have it done again. The expense and also the time found looking for their kids, and with the amount of work it took to work out schedule to take care of my kids, that was just not an option in my mind. Like, I was going to do this once and it had to be successful, because I just couldn't imagine having to go through this twice. The other scenario, which is even worse, is people basically, essentially it's getting botched and it's not really fixable. The best you can get is try to find someone who's willing to at least try to improve your outcome. And that horrified me, right? That was not an option. So I interviewed these other surgeons. One, he had a lot of experience, which I was drawn to, but unfortunately he had so much experience that he was old school, and he uses some methods that research has proven has some bad outcomes. For example, I'm sure you've covered mesh, right?
Mesh. We talked about that. We want to talk about this. You don't need to name anybody, but mesh, there's no reason to have mesh ever, 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 ever in DR without a hernia, because there's no tissue missing. It's just pulled apart and become thin and frail. So you don't need to add some foreign material that's going to add so much complexity unless you have a hernia. And I'm not referring to a belly button hernia. That can be fixed and should be fixed at the time of your DR. I'm talking about some other random hernia. So that's one thing. Okay.
Right. So the second doctor, he was young and quite frankly inexperienced, and he had some good results, but I needed someone who had a longer track record of success, because when I was talking to him about issues with my belly button, because I had a little bit more complicated issues, he was, wanting to send me his research paper about it. And you know what I mean? I'm like, I don't need someone who knows, like, theoretically how to deal with this. Like, I need someone who has a long track record of dealing with complicated issues.
Those are very smart.
And the third surgeon, my biggest issue with her is I came in with a list of questions, because this is a big deal. This is an issue I've been dealing with for almost a decade. I'm spending a lot of money. I'm sacrificing a lot. I'm going to need so much help. I'm calling in all my favors to make this happen. And I'd ask her a question like, what kind of stitches do you use? And she looked at me like I could not be more dumb, like so condescending, like, how dare you question my methods? And I was thinking, I can't work with someone who isn't willing to meet me where I am and respect the fact that this is very important to me. And when I talked to you, you were not defensive about anything you did. You were willing to defend all your choices as a surgeon. And I needed someone who I knew I could respect and who could respect me. And to me, that was like just a non-starter when it's someone who I don't even feel like I can have a conversation with, because it is a long process and you need someone who can answer your questions.
Right. Absolutely. You have two types of patients in the world. I know because I take care of them. They have those that just kind of defer and like the old school paternalistic approach. And then you have modern day patients who like the collaborative approach. The paternalistic patients are great. They're easy. Whatever you say, doctor, I trust you. Okay. Well, don't you want to? No, whatever. It's fine. And then there's today's patients, which are collaborative. They get on Instagram, they get on Google, they ask their friends, and then they come in understandably and appropriately with a list of questions, some of which are super smart and some of them which are off basis. But you can't today be a physician who is engaged in dialogue with patients and be defensive because a patient's asking you a question. My wife has had 3 spine surgeries in 18 months under the age of 30, and every single doctor we spoke to, I had such a challenge communicating with them, and I'm a goddamn surgeon. At the end of which, we had to beg them to answer our questions. You know how frustrated I was? I want to kill these people. And guess what? She's still suffering, and we never got our questions answered. So you can't be defensive about someone asking you questions. And the second is you have to be able to explain yourself without seeming defensive and condescending when someone says, hey, this other guy said whatever. And then you got to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. That's not what I do. And this is why I think it ends up like this. And so when you have collaborative patients, AKA modern day intelligent people, you have to have an exchange or you'll lose that patient population. So, I think that's great. So I keep getting sidetracked here for a second. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to ask Rihanna, because I know she's going to have some other perspective from Canada. I like that we have an international component here. So join us in a second. We'll come back and dive back in. I got a few other things about traveling that I want to help you guys help, like what do we need to spend money on, et cetera. So join us at the next break. We're going to come back and discuss some more about saving for your DR repair. All right, welcome back to Plastic Surgery Uncensored. This is our fourth and final episode regarding DR. It's gotten super exciting and heated here. We have our amazing guest joining us. And what we were talking about before the break was like, what's value? How do we decide how much money we want to spend on something like a surgery? And how do we decide if it's worth it to us or not? And our two previous guests were talking about how they decided how they wanted to spend money. And it kind of came down to a process of elimination by interacting with other people and realizing not so much what they wanted to spend money on but rather what they didn't want to spend money on. In other words, you kind of eventually end up knowing, okay, well, these other individuals and I didn't connect. It doesn't matter how much they were charging me. And this person and I connected and this made sense. Now, so I will, I know that Rihanna, you did yours in Canada and you did yours vis-a-vis your insurance, which is an amazing situation. And so did you have to pay anything extra out of pocket?
Not really. Like for the binder, I guess, that I used post-op. I was fully prepared to pay though. I interviewed several different surgeons. I actually interviewed one surgeon that's located in the US. So I was willing to travel as well. It just so happened though, I met with a surgeon in my city and I had that connection. He answered all of my questions. He validated that my DR could be causing some of the issues that I was having, like digestion. I had pelvic pain. So he was the first surgeon that I met with that understood that DR can also cause other issues rather than just me still looking pregnant when I wasn't. And then he had said, you don't have loose skin. I think I can get this covered for you under insurance. And I started the group because I really want to advocate for the surgery to be covered by insurance, because I felt horrible and I cannot imagine not being able to afford a surgery that would help me have a better quality of life. And I think it's for the women that can't afford it, that's just one more kick in the stomach that you have to deal with.
No, and I again commend you. So, you guys know that Rihanna has this group, and I know that you guys are parts of groups, and I love these advocacy groups amongst educating women in terms of what they can expect when they're kind of lost and they come in and they you guys all corroborate and collaborate. This is as you guys know, a big part of what I try to do in the DR world, which is not only just bring awareness, but because of the nature of my personality, which is that I tend to be a little more direct, I try to get people to understand how silly this is, that this isn't covered. It's just almost asinine. And, we're going to try to get as much information out there so that people can. And I think that's true. It's a shame that if a woman is suffering from this terrible condition, again, I'm not talking about a mild DR that kind of is cosmetically unlike, I don't like it. Just like I don't, if you have some saggy breasts, it's terrible and it's awful that happened as a result of pregnancy, but no one's going to pay for your breast to be lifted and implanted. But I'm talking about severe cases of DR where you're unable to lift your kid out of a car seat unless you position yourself correctly, wear a couple of binders, and then you're going to pay the price later that evening. That needs to be covered. The thing that we want to talk about last is sort of two of you guys traveled, right? And so we're talking about money because that's what this subject is. This episode is about money, money, money. Because for a lot of people, they make it through all the episodes, 1, 2, and 3, and then they get to episode 4, and that's where the problem is. I get it, I want it, I'm ready, I just can't afford it. And then the question then becomes is, okay, so we've talked about how to save. We talked about the emotions of saving, which is you're worth it. You're worth it. You're worth the money. If you're saying, well, I should save the money for my kids, you're essentially, I don't know how many women I've spoken to that had underlying unconscious resentment towards their kids for the physical changes that they underwent as a result of pregnancy, and how that impacts their interactions with their children when they don't feel good about themselves. And then they have surgery and their relationship with their children, forget about their husband, which is obvious. Their children's relationship gets better. They're not angry. They're not irritable because they feel good and they don't feel like this ruined them. So we already know all those things. And we know that and then they get to the point where they got to pay for it and they have an issue. So the question is, if you do your local, obviously, if you can get this done locally, as you did, Rihanna, that is by far the best way to do it. You have saving on travel, hotel, people taking care of your kids. I mean, there's so many benefits. Going back to follow-ups, gosh, my God, there's hundreds. But I would argue, and I will defer to both of you, that if you find that you do not connect with someone locally, and that after doing your homework and being involved with groups like the ones that you guys have, that you find that there is a surgeon somewhere else, is that worth the extra money? And what are the things that you have to save for in addition that you didn't have to pay for had you stayed locally? So, Steph, do you think it's worth it to pay extra money to travel? And if so, what were the extra expenses?
I mean, I would have gone anywhere, honestly, because, getting back to the value, the priority that is our one and only body, honestly, I would have gone anywhere. So that was actually, I'd even called my insurance company before, just starting my journey. And they're like, actually, there's some local surgeons that might in part cover your procedure. And I was like, wow, that would be so great. And so again, went to interview them, and it just wasn't a good fit. They're, all the things that we talked about before. So this is just such an important procedure. And so that's why I decided to travel. So to travel to see you, it wasn't, that long of an airplane ride, but certainly, airfare, Airbnb, had a friend come down, take care of me. Well, and I also, food delivered while you're there. So those are some of the things, because you can't really get up and move. So those little logistics, and I can speak to that if that's useful, but I did just want to say that I would almost argue that it is better for healing to go out of town and be away from children. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and there's no way that I can be like, okay, mama can hold you for a little bit, or I can sit on the ground and not twist, or, so it was so much easier for my, my mental healing and my physical healing to be out of town.
Yeah,
we did a FaceTime call, every day before bed. But I got to focus so much on my healing. And like we've mentioned before, there's so much to this that's not even just physical healing. This is a new lease on life. This is like entering your family in a different way. I mean, I had so many heart-to-hearts with my husband when I was out of town, because I was just like, oh my gosh, mentally there's so many things that are shifting and changing on my end. So I found it profoundly useful to be out of town and have some space to process that. And it's super stressful for me to hear kids crying and not be able to pick them up. So
excellent. I like that point a lot. And I think that's a very good point. In an odd way, it allows you to be isolated so you can take care of yourself without having to feel like you're being pulled in many directions. Yeah. To highlight some of the things you said, one is you're going to have to pay extra for travel. So that's going to be there. Any good surgeon is going to see you multiple times. Do not go do your surgery of this magnitude and disappear. I'm going to just do the surgery and then I'll just do everything from Skype. Then don't waste your money. Don't waste your money. You must, if you pay for something expensive, you need to pay through all the way to the end. It is your surgeon's dream that you never show up again. You paid him. He's got the money. They perform the surgery. And then everything after that is just annoying. You're coming back, you have issues, you're complaining, they're not making no more money. So their wish is that they love out-of-town patients. I hate out-of-town patients because then I don't get to take care of you. You're not here. Travel's kind of a pain in the ass. And then I get to see what's going on with you. And then we have to do it via Skype. And hey, so you should consider making sure that you follow up at least several times. You know that I tortured you guys and made you stay for 2 weeks. That's non-negotiable. You're not doing a breast aug. You're not doing a rhinoplasty. You're doing an abdominoplasty that has a high rate, high is an over-exaggeration, that has a rate of pulmonary embolus. You do not get in an airplane and fly back. You stay wherever you are for 2 weeks. That I recommend. And then make sure you follow back. So travel's one, hotel, whether you're in a hotel or now, thank God, we have something called Airbnb. I think that has made it incredibly, incredibly good for recovery. A, you're in a home that has a kitchen or an apartment, and B, you can afford a whole 2 weeks. It's usually not, you don't need to stay at the Four Seasons. Definitely want to bring a friend. So if your friend is awesome, or your husband or your caregiver, I would recommend them over some nurse that you're going to have to pay for 2 weeks or at least 10 days, but you're definitely going to have to help someone else come. And then the food and all those other expenses. And then maybe you need help at home. So those are some of the expensive. Lisa, what you tell me your experience. A, do you think it was worth the travel and you should travel? And B, what were the expenses that you incurred?
Yeah, so I was going to say exactly the same thing Steph said, that I think I actually had a better outcome because I was away from my family. I think it was easier on them too, because I wasn't there. They weren't, like even after I came home, it took them a while to understand, like mom has, owies, like we need to be soft with mom. But for those first 2 weeks where, it's a major recovery, it was just so much mentally easier for me to get the time I needed to rest, because you are resting a lot, and for the kids to have someone who is there for them. And it was actually a really great outcome, to the point where if I had gone with someone local, I almost would have also gotten an Airbnb, or, stayed at a friend's, like somewhere to have that separation, because I saw other people at the surgery who just had a hard time, disciplining themselves to not go back into the swing of things and help, doing all the things that they are used to doing. So it just made it easier because that was not an option for me. I had to rest. And it really was just the cost of the Airbnb, which does save a lot over a hotel, because we initially booked a hotel and then all of a sudden the light bulb of getting an Airbnb came on. And so we saved probably about $1,000 by doing an Airbnb. And you really don't need much. My husband was actually he can work remotely, or at least he was for that period. And so he was able to continue working, because I just, and then we, to save on food, we planned just a few simple meals. We did some shopping.
You go to the grocery store, because you're in an Airbnb. You don't need to eat. You would have to eat it. I don't think food necessarily is a big component unless you like to dine out at high restaurants. You're going to have to eat in LA. You're going to have to eat at home. You're going to eat here. You go to the supermarket and you get some basic foods, and it's really not expensive. But of course, travel is expensive. Of course, lodging can be expensive. But the bottom line, and I think the message, and is that and what I hear from you guys is that once you've established that you're worth it, then you should demand and expect the best for yourself. And then you should hold yourself accountable that through the journey, even though you find it discouraging that the local physicians they may well be, as in Rihanna's case, but they may not be what you're looking for. Have the discipline, the courage to demand the best for yourself and go and get it, and go get what you want. And if it costs you a little more, then so be it. And if you can't afford it, save. I say this over and over and over again to my revision patients, which has become about a third of my practice. If you couldn't have afforded what you thought you needed, then you should have waited, because you've waited a long time. And the truth of the matter is that, very rare exceptions, you don't have to fix your diastasis this summer. It would be great. It's timing. And no, I couldn't afford it this summer. I wanted to go to this guy in, Vancouver, but I couldn't afford his prices because understandably he's more expensive. And so as a result, I waited another year and I saved and I got what I wanted. It doesn't guarantee you're going to be happy. Not at all, but it's certainly more likely. And the message is, you get what you paid for. let me rephrase that. I always say you don't, and I'll say it again and I'll close with that. You don't get more you don't always get more by paying more, but you always get less for paying less. And that's just the truth of life. And you guys have been outstanding, and I'm really happy and really excited and very appreciative that you guys have joined me to share your experience and help whoever's listening to figure out what they need to do, because it's all about paying it forward, right? You guys are done. You live your lives. You feel great. You don't need to come back and have this conversation. What the hell do you need to talk about it for? You talk about it so that because somebody must have talked about something, they wrote a review, or you read something from another mom that stimulated and excited you, and someone like Rihanna put together a group that now is there to empower other women. That's great of you guys. You guys put together a really good thing. So again, that's going to be it's going to wrap it up for our DR 4-episode series. I hope whoever's listening found it to be useful. There are lots of amazing groups out there. And remember, you're worth it. All right, guys, let's see you at the next episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored.